engine and the power of it around about I think about 1700 horsepower. Quite a powerful engine. The Vengeance itself was developed by Consolidated Aircraft. They're the guys that built the B-42, B-48 type bombers that a lot of people have heard about, and they later merged with Consolidated to become, or with Vultee to become Consolidated Vultee or Convair. And you've probably heard about the Connie, because that before jets came through, Convairs were a popular mode of transport around Australia. So that's a bit of a history of the company itself. They built the aircraft specifically as a strategic dive bomber. So it was rather ungainly to see fly in that it didn't share all of the sleek lines and beauty of a fighter aircraft. That's not what it was designed to do. It was designed to drop from 10, 12,000 feet in a near vertical dive to its target. The pilot would be watching through a sight, and at the appropriate time he'd release his load, pull out the dive brakes and get the hell out of there. So he's very, very vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire at that stage. So it took a brave man indeed to put that thing into a dive over an enemy-held position. And that's what they were trained to do, and that's what these guys were trained to do, and in fact some of them very likely did in the southwest Pacific area. They replaced artillery with their accuracy of firing, and being an old gunner, I know how inaccurate ground fire can be. They could locate and pinpoint a target and hit it with deadly accuracy. But to do so, they had to take their lives in their own hands. It wasn't too long after the introduction. Australia was given the things by the British. We probably got them from Lend-Lease or whatever, doesn't it? So we had enough to send up to New Guinea and to wreak havoc on Japanese-held positions by dive bombing. 2 months before this incident, and for reasons that we still don't know, the Vengeance was pulled out of service, withdrawn from service in the southwest Pacific area, brought back down to Bowen in Queensland, most of them, to the Aircraft Performance Unit, and modified. Some modifications were done. The aircraft were later dispatched to Burma, where they did the same sort of work. So that was basically the story. In this case, these two aircraft were sent down to Laverton for some form of retrofit or modification to the engines, the fuel pump, I believe. And to do that, they flew, the crew would normally be two, pilot and radio operator, observer, in some later cases a gunner. Went down, but they took one passenger, and that was Philip West, cheeky little bloke over there. Philip was a clerk at one APU, and he was brought down here too because his dad had a market garden, established a market garden in Christmas Hills. I met a guy, and I think we've got a picture here somewhere of a Vengeance with Diane written on the cowling. That particular aircraft belonged to a fellow called Cyril McPherson, otherwise known as Mac, and I was able to dig Mac up. I found him living out in Box Hill somewhere, and I went over there to do an interview with Mac, and I had a couple of photo albums and amongst there, and of course Mac was well on in years, but an accomplished Vengeance pilot. He saw some stuff that I had on the table with a reference to Les Languish, and he said to me, God, Doug Languish, what happened to him? And I said, look, I'm sorry, but that's a bit of what the interview is about. Did you know him? He said, no. He said, we did the nav and reconnaissance course up at Laverton together. He said, we were good mates. And I said, no. So I guess the chat went on for a while, and I had, again, the narrative, the time that the planes left Laverton to the time they went in. And it was a significant time, mate. I didn't pick up on it. But this guy was a pilot. He said, what do you reckon happened there? I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, where did these guys come from? And I said, look, from memory, Footscray, Yarraville, over the other side, Glen Huntley, Christmas Hills. I've left a place out, forgive me.
Box Hill.
Yeah, Box Hill. And he said, with a grin on his face, they've done a beat-up. I said, what's a beat-up? He said, they go out and overfly their home before they leave to take off. He says, no question. He said, that's what they've done. So I kind of noted that and didn't go any further with it. But sometime later, I got to interview Ralph Erskine's family. And I went over there, and the guy that I was talking to said, yeah, they flew over our place. I said, you sure? He said, mate, little girl next door, and this is touching, so if I get a bit emotional, just forgive me. All of these guys were idolised by children in the immediate vicinity. And one of their obligations when they came home on leave was to escort these kids to school. Because these kids just wanted to show off their uncle, their cousin, or their friend who was the airman. And so this young girl next door was pestering Ralph. And he'd always have a story to tell her. And he must have said, tomorrow I'll fly over. And he said, I can still remember the little kid running down the hall yelling out, Daddy, Daddy, the planes are coming. They went out in the yard. These two planes came over in tight formation, banked to the left, and took the track up towards Christmas Hills. They overflew Philip West's place. His dad was an army going, by the way, who would have counted on his son to be helping on the farm. He was out serving his country. They went over there, then took a track, I assume. Now I've got to draw some assumptions. Down to the first, if you're flying vegetable, the first thing you'd look for would be Yan Yan Reservoir, then the city, the township of Whittlesea, and from there, plot the track, and I think from memory 32 degrees would take you to the Kilmore Gap. Remembering that you've got the mountain range on one side, Mt.Disappointment, and on the left side, Pretty Sally Hill, for want of a better description. So they were seen by Charles Tout, Margie's grandfather, saw them fly over his property. Les Batten was out tending to his land, and he saw them come over Pine Pot Hill at Whittlesea, heading there. So I think it was Batten, Tout, and Hall was the last guy to see them. It just happened that a fella called Meakin was a flight instructor at Benalla, and he was out rabbiting. He was on leave as well, and he's out rabbiting on Coulthard's property. And he watched them come over and noticed that, they were running straight, level and normal. But then as they disappeared into the mist, he heard the engines throttle up and then bang, bang. the two craft had gone in. He ran to the house and called air flash. The other guys had seen it. The local cop at Whittlesea took out his watch, as a policeman would do, to just note the time that they'd gone in. They assembled a group down at Bruce's Creek. Alf Blair went up to the top, the rest went in from the bottom, and they located the wreckage, and of course there was nothing to do. They had gone in. So that is about it. I often hear this comment, oh, they were flying too low. I've gone over that before. The undulating country, and Mark lives in it, is quite nice, but there are some sharp rises there that you won't even notice unless you're looking. And the tendency for the weather to close on you in minutes is incredible. So when I was sort of looking at it, I thought, you know, again, it's not enough to just say that they disobeyed flying orders. Of course, that was patently obvious. But their intent was all there, and perhaps today could be argued. They were just running for the gap, and they were scud running, which is mean just flying under the low cloud, just in the hope that they would see a hole, or confident, in fact, that if they'd maintained that altitude, they would make it to the Kilmore Gap and fly up the gap, no drama. They drifted to the right into the high ground, and that was the end of it, essentially. I don't know that I can tell you too much more about it. There was, of course, a subsequent court of inquiry, and as a result of that, some people got themselves into deep trouble for allowing that flight to take off. I can tell you that there was a delay in heading off. They were actually going up to Wagga via, Mascot via Wagga, and then on to Bowen, probably going to refuel at Mascot. At the time that they took off, and that's mentioned here in the narrative, they had gone in earlier in the morning with the intention of taking off within minutes. So they'd gone into the control room and picked up the weather reports, which were all okay. They got out to the aircraft, and for some reason they were delayed for a couple of hours. Didn't know why. No reason was given for that delay, but when they did take off, another weather report had been posted and the route to Wagga was closed. They hadn't been informed. So that was a blunder, I suppose, and could have led up to the condition. That cold weather had moved down, the whole front had come down on them. So that was about it.
What time of the year is this?
I will go into that too. It was about a month ago, in 1944, I think. 25th of May, sorry. So even, a little bit earlier. But there's something that I wanted to raise with that. One is the configuration of the plane. The plane itself was designed to operate, and it did, very efficiently in a vertical dive, or near vertical dive. And what that meant was the angle of incidence, or the angle of attack on the wing, was neutral. Most of those propeller-driven aircraft of that day had a 4-degree angle of incidence. And that angle of incidence meant that with power, you could maintain your height, you wouldn't sink. So to fly this aircraft effectively, you flew it with a 4-degree nose up, like that, not like that. You were flying at that time of the year into a low sun, and with cloud on the mountain, it does have this impression of creating, similar to that mirage effect, you're seeing a false horizon. So those were all causes that could have caused or could have contributed to them not having the direct bearing that they thought they did. Those are facts.
What's left at that site, Liz? What's left at that site?
Well, sorry, there is stuff. There is a pit where they buried a lot of the stuff that wasn't salvaged. And I don't know what might be in that pit, but what they did do, we ran into a fellow, Bill Gosling, you probably remember Bill. He was with the recovery unit that went up there to clean the area up. And Bill said they took up a lot of kerosene. So what wasn't damaged and burnt in the initial impact was melted and destroyed and then bulldozed into a pit, which was dug. It wasn't bulldozed, it was pushed into the pit, it was dug by hand. The recovery crew spent 3 or 4 days up there cleaning it up. The only things that you could find up there now, and I haven't been up there for 20 years, there was an engine, a right cyclone, down in Running Creek. Probably been salvaged, I don't know. And bits and pieces, you may see some photos of bits and pieces here, just small bits of melted aluminium and stuff like that were around there. There's evidence that something bad had happened on the mountain at that point. But again, when you stand at the site where they'd gone in and look up and you think 20 feet higher, they would have scared the hell out of them, but they would have made it. That's just the way it goes. So, yeah, any further questions on that? The other thing I would mention is that an altimeter is a very, very delicate instrument. Those of you who are silly enough to fly would know. And we're talking at variations in that level that are affected by the change in air pressure. So when you get into the foothills there, the air is constantly moving, and that change in air pressure could easily impact on the effect. You know, it's sure, you could say, well look, visual, not below 1,000, okay. If that hill closes up on you really quickly, you might look out and think, oh yeah, I'm going to make that. That's no worries. You don't see the second wave or whatever. I don't know, what happened on that occasion. Obviously, it didn't work in their favour. Okay, so then we have Terry